Relik. Obviously, today we're seeing reports that for the first time since Israel launched its ground offensive against Hezbollah, forces from the IDF, artillery corps more specifically, have crossed the border and are operating deeper inside southern Lebanon. I mean, at this point, what are their goals? We keep on hearing this number parroted that 80% of Hezbollah's weapons have been destroyed, but we've been seeing very heavy rocket fire over the course of the last 2 weeks from Hezbollah, indicating that perhaps that's not necessarily the case.
Well, it all depends on what is heavily. You're talking about, let's say, 100 to 200 rockets. What we expected before the war started was something closer to 4,000 per day of precision guided munition. Now we're seeing non-precision munition numbers 100 to 200, with the number of casualties in Israel very low, much lower than expected. So let's put that aside. The idea is to put enough pressure on Hezbollah and Lebanon to agree to 1701. The idea that within the framework, Israel would be allowed to strike against Hezbollah is most probably the Israeli way of putting an extra mile, so to speak, within, so that it'll be able to take it out in lieu of something else, because that is something that a sovereign country or even a non-sovereign country can never accept. But Israel has the right, if Hezbollah breaks the agreement, to intervene. Surely it does. And
but it can't be formalized.
It probably can't be formalized. Nobody can accept that. So I guess it was put in just for the sake of, I would say, sake of argument on the table to be taken off at a later stage.
Right.
Will the French intervene and be part of the force? Will the Americans? Is the Lebanese army going to be there? Is it going to be fortified? What is it going to look like? Right. The scene is not clear yet, but enough that 1701 will be implemented with a quiet backing of the United States for Israel to intervene on the ground and from the air in case Hezbollah creeps back in. That would probably do. Another question that you asked is what happens close to the border. Those points that have direct contact with Israeli communities had been razed to the ground. So that is something that the forces are busy doing right now.
One quick
All right,
point.
we have to unfortunately move on to our next story, but we will continue this discussion because we're going to be speaking about Iran right now, which makes me turn to you, Relik. I mean, what does this reported shift to Syria ultimately mean for Israel's ability to act against these Iranian groups?
Well, it makes it easier, and remember that this area in Syria is no man's land. So being under the auspices of Assad is not exactly the question here. There is a number of players, as we said, the Houthis, the Kurds as well, putting pressure on Iraq. And the fact that Syria is really in no man's land. Assad doesn't control that area. Nobody really controls that area. So that allows some leeway for those militias to fire from, but it also gets them as targets closer to Israel and easier to hit them. They don't have infrastructure there and they have to rebuild it. So that puts in question the idea that it's a short-lived initiative because we're getting about 2 months away from the end of the war, more or less, and everybody's shifting gears to hit the most. Now, remember the Kissinger strategy. When you go to the table to negotiate, you fire all you have, and it applies to both sides, to get out most of what you can. As far as the area of deniability, as they say, denial is not a river in Egypt. So everybody's putting out misinformation, disinformation, talking to the media, letting out all kinds of fake news. And we should be careful in understanding the logic. Who wants what when you read something?
All right. So, Relik, what I want to ask you now is, in regards to these draft orders that have just been handed out, what comes next for the draftees, and what happens if they refuse to enlist? We're obviously already seeing, many take to the streets right now.
So let's just get back a little bit. 1977. Up to that time, the agreement was that 400 super intelligent Haredim will study, and all the rest will enlist. And that worked well until 1977, when Begin needed the Haredi political support and backing, and so he actually opened the anybody who wants to study can study. He wasn't aware of the repercussions within a couple of generations to where we are right now. So Israel Katz is in a position that he hasn't established trust between himself and the military commanders.
Right.
And this is the dividing line where they're putting a lot of pressure on him. So is he going to be against the military in something that is so important for Israel? He's not a fool. So he's putting out those drafts. If the Haredis do not come forward and enlist, they stand to lose not only their allocations, but also be draft dodgers. And draft dodgers within Israel suffer all kinds of limitations, and that remains to be seen.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you both for joining us. Really fascinating to hear your takes on this subject. We're out for a quick break. We'll be back shortly.